In this shorty episode, I am answering a listener question from Kate about the way her cervix dilated during labor. Welcome to the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. If you're having a baby in the hospital, you are giving birth in a system that too often takes away power from women over what happens in their own bodies. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a practicing board-certified OBGYN who's had the privilege of helping well over 1,000 babies into this world. I've been a doctor for over 20 years, and I'm here to help you take back your power, advocate for yourself, and have the beautiful pregnancy and birth that you deserve. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and it's not a substitute for medical advice. Check out the full disclaimer at drnicolerankins.com/disclaimer. Now let's get to it. Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Whether this is your first time listening or you've been here before, thank you. Thank you for spending some time with me today. This is a shorty episode. I release these episodes on Thursdays and I talk about topics or answer listener questions. And in this episode, I'm answering a listener question from Kate. Before I get into the question, let me remind you that you can only get these episodes if you subscribe to the podcast. So be sure to hit subscribe wherever you're listening to me right now. That way you never, ever miss an episode. So Kate's question was this: hello, I'm a big fan of your podcast. It was so informative during my recent pregnancy and helped me feel a lot more confident and calm going into and then during the birth of my baby. Thank you for what you do for so many pregnant people. Well, you are so welcome. And then it goes on to say, I saw you've been answering questions on some episodes, and I was wondering if you could talk about whether cervical dilation changes from one person to another. I was checked at 5 centimeters, started feeling pressure after a few hours, and then a really strong urge to push after another few hours. I was unmedicated, so I could really feel those sensations, but was told to push against this urge, and I quote, hold it in because I was only at 8 centimeters and that I would tear my cervix if I pushed. This kept going on for about an hour, at which point they called the doctor, who said, I quote again, 8, maybe 9. I guess you could push if you want to. I wasn't really able to talk, so I just pushed and everything went well. But then I started wondering why my body would give me such a powerful urge to push if it was too early. Is it possible that 9 centimeters was as far as my cervix would dilate? I'm a really small person. Does that play a role? Does everyone get as far as 10 centimeters? I'm curious and would love to hear more about this. Thank you. Well, thank you for that very interesting question, Kate. I'm going to get into it. If you want to send me a question that you want me to answer in an upcoming short episode, you can shoot me a DM on Instagram at Dr. Nicole Rankins, or you can head to my website, fill out my contact form. That's drnicolerankins.com/contact. I'd be delighted to try and answer. So first, let's talk about what a cervical exam is, so we're clear on that. When we are doing a cervical exam, we are actually checking for 3 things. 1 is dilation, 1 is effacement, and 1 is station. So you'll hear us say 3 numbers. It'll be like 680 minus 1. So that first number is dilation. That is how open the cervix is in centimeters. We measure in centimeters, not inches. So how open the cervix is in centimeters. Then effacement is how thin the cervix is. The cervix starts out as like a tube, so to speak, and it gets shorter and thinner as you go into labor. That's what effacement is. And I should say dilation is from 0 to 10 centimeters. Effacement is from 0% to 100% effaced. When the cervix is 100% effaced, it is like paper thin. And then station is the position of your baby in your pelvis in relation to your pelvic bones, specifically the ischial spines. So it starts out as a negative number if the baby's head is above, or the butt, but head is above the ischial spines. So if it's above the ischial spines, it's going to be a negative number. If it's right at the ischial spines, it's going to be 0. And then as it goes past the ischial spines, it's going to be a positive number. So an example, 580 minus 1 would be 5 centimeters dilated, 80% effaced, and minus 1 station would be a centimeter above the ischial spines. Cervical exams are subjective. We don't, have a ruler in anybody's vagina measuring the exact dilation. So it is subjective. It is a bit of a guess. So it can vary slightly between providers. I don't want you to get frustrated if one provider tells you that you are 80% effaced and then another one tells you you're 70% effaced. It doesn't mean you're going backwards or anything like that. It just can be a slight variation in what we say, and that is totally normal. I talk in detail about cervical exams, including pictures and strategies to make cervical checks less uncomfortable inside the birth preparation course. The birth preparation course is my online childbirth education class. You can check it out at drnicolerankins.com/enroll. Now, Kate said she started to feel an intense urge to push at 8 centimeters, and she was told not to push because she could tear. So 8 centimeters is roughly about, if you cut an apple open, that's roughly like a good medium to large size apple. That is roughly about 8 centimeters. A bagel is going to be about 10 centimeters, just to give you a little bit of a comparison. So 8 centimeters is roughly about an apple. And it isn't common necessarily to feel the urge to push at 8 centimeters, but it's not uncommon either. So although we don't see it a lot, we certainly see it where people feel that urge to push before they are completely dilated, with complete dilation being 10 centimeters. Now, as far as could you tear? Yes, this is a possibility. If the cervix is really tight to the baby's head, so really tight around the baby's head, and you push against that tight cervix, then yes, your cervix can tear. Yes, that can be pretty bad, actually. Cervical tears can bleed a lot. They're also challenging to repair because it can be hard to see. So sometimes you have to take patients into the operating room to repair a cervical tear where there's better lighting, where there's better instruments so that we can visualize things and repair them properly. However, if the cervix is 8 centimeters and it's a loose 8 centimeters and a stretchy 8 centimeters, and the baby isn't necessarily that big, then sure, you can absolutely potentially push at 8 centimeters. Another instance where this may happen is if the baby is preterm and the baby is smaller, then absolutely, a baby may fit through just fine at 8 centimeters. And as you push, the cervix will just slide back around the baby's head. So I'm guessing that when the doctor checked you and said, you're 8, maybe 9 centimeters, and that you could push if you want to, that he or she, I can't remember if you said if it was a he or she, that he or she was saying that your cervix felt stretchy and that it was going to be safe for you to push because the cervix was just going to move back around the baby's head, which it sounded like happened in this particular instance. Now, a couple things I want to add on top of this. If it feels like it's tight, if the cervix feels like, it's really tight against the head, then we often tell people to just gently bear down if they can't resist the urge to push. So don't full on push with everything you've got. Just kind of gently bear down with each contraction to help relieve some of that urge to push, but don't give it like everything you got. That gentle bearing down should not tear your cervix. So that is something that we can do. The next thing I want to say is this is usually more so of an issue when you have an unmedicated birth. This isn't so much going to happen when you have an epidural. You may feel a lot of pressure with an epidural. If you feel it with an epidural, it's because your epidural isn't that effective. So this issue of wanting to feel the urge to push, even though you're not 10 centimeters dilated, is going to be much more likely to happen in an unmedicated birth. It's possible with an epidural, but much more likely in an unmedicated birth. And then the other thing that I want to say is that doctors, we really don't have enough experience with unmedicated birth and a truly hands-off approach to know exactly how this situation would unfold if you pushed in your 8 centimeters. Our default, the way that we learn how to practice, the way that we typically approach things is to check and quote unquote make sure someone is fully dilated before they push. But that is not necessarily what happens in all of birth. Midwives, for instance, particularly out of hospital midwives, don't necessarily do that. I have heard of plenty of stories of women, people going through their entire labor without being checked at all, without being checked a single time. That is not likely to happen in the U.S. hospital birth system, but outside of the hospital, it does happen, or with midwives, it is more likely to happen. In those circumstances, it is much more of a follow the lead of the woman's body. And if her body is telling her to push, then the birth attendant follows her and she pushes, okay? But doctors, we just don't have that same sort of training. We're so very much so in the in order to tell if somebody's ready to push, you check to see that they're dilated enough. We don't necessarily follow the lead of a woman's body the way that midwives often do. That's just the reality of how we're taught, how we practice. So to answer your other questions, is it possible that 9 centimeters was as far as your cervix would dilate? It's possible, yes, maybe, but also not something that we can necessarily even figure out. That's a hard question to answer, and also not necessarily an answer that I think is relevant in the sense that you dilated enough that your baby's head came out and your baby came out safely, right? Okay, so possible that you got to 9 centimeters and that was it, maybe, but it was enough and it got the job done. Also, you said I'm a really small person. Does that play a role? I wouldn't say that you being small plays a role, but it may play a role if your baby was small. So I'm curious to know the size of your baby, because a smaller baby is going to be able to fit out through a smaller opening, right? That just makes sense. It's not going to be likely that you're going to have a 10.5-pound vaginal birth through an 8-centimeter cervix. You're going to need all the room you can get for a big baby, but a smaller baby maybe may fit. And then does everyone get as far as 10 centimeters? No, not necessarily. There are some certain instances, not common, but it happens, where we know that people didn't get quite to 10 centimeters and they pushed and baby came out. That's going to be particularly the case with a preterm infant. That can definitely happen with a smaller preterm baby, that you're not quite 10 centimeters and the baby comes on through without any issues. Okay. So there you have it. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to me right now. Remember, that is the only way you're going to hear these short episodes. Also, I would love it. Will you please leave me a review in Apple Podcast? I want to hear what you think about the show. And those reviews are really helpful to help the show grow, help me to reach and serve as many people as I can. So if you want to help me on my mission to reach and serve as many people, then drop me a review in Apple Podcast. It really, really, really does help. And if you want me to answer a question on an upcoming episode, then shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Nicole Rankins, or head to drnicolerankins.com/contact and drop your question in that contact form. So that's it for this episode. Do come on back next week and remember that you deserve a beautiful pregnancy and birth.